YouTube, what's going down? My name is Freezy, but you can call me stupid. Right now I'm cooking some breakfast because I got up pretty early this morning and I wasn't really sure what to do with my time. But I have been getting a lot of messages of people asking, Freezy, how do you edit your photos? I'm mainly a lifestyle / portrait photographer, but I also edit my own photos in my free time. And with that in mind, here's a few tips on how you can improve your Instagram game within a matter of minutes. Bon appetit! Alright, so we're just gonna kick things off here. First of all, before we start on anything, the app that we will be using today is Lightroom, just because I can sync it across all my devices, and it's also free, so you don't have to worry about paying for it or anything. But let's just jump right into it. So the first thing we're gonna do is obviously we're gonna pick a picture out. I already have one picked out here, and I'm just gonna airdrop it to my iPad real quick. This is one of the reasons why I love using an iPad to edit, because it's a lot more intuitive with the touch interface, aside from instead of using a keyboard. But also, let's say I took a picture on my iPhone or something, I can always just pick it and then airdrop it right there, and then it'll go straight to my device. So the workflow, in my opinion, is just so much more seamless when you're using an iOS device, so I definitely recommend it. All right, so we've got our photo. Now what we're gonna do is just open this up in Lightroom, and there we go. So if you aren't blind, you'll notice that the biggest issue with this photo is that it's super underexposed, right? But the good news is you can actually save underexposed photos fairly easily. All you have to do, go over to this light tab and then go over to where it says shadows and just brighten that puppy up, and whoa, look at that, your photo's already a lot better. A big rule of thumb of mine whenever I edit my photos is I tend to increase the exposure a bit, like so. Now obviously you don't want to overexpose it, right? Which is when it's basically too bright. So you have to find a right balance, and sometimes using the auto function isn't exactly enough, because nothing you can implement in AI learning could beat the human eye, right? So it's really up to your judgment. But in this case, whenever you're increasing your shadows like that, obviously you're gonna end up with a little bit more noise and more pixelation. So what you want to do is you want to combat that by going to effects and then kind of playing around with the clarity, and also, where is it? No, it's in detail. Oops. you want to go kind of play around with noise reduction a little bit, because you don't want it to be super noisy, but at the same time, whenever your noise reduction effect is too high, it's gonna look too smoothed out, and it's not gonna look very realistic. So you want to play with sharpening and noise reduction to kind of counteract one another, right? I think about there is pretty good. You can also play with clarity. Now clarity is similar to sharpening, except it's a little bit more refined, I guess you could say. Not refined, but a little bit of texture as well. The thing about all these effects is that you have to always find the balance of everything, right? Whenever you have clarity too high, it's gonna look like a cartoon, but whenever it's super low, it's gonna look like you just stepped out of a shower. So it's really just all about finding the right balance between whatever you edit you want. And that's kind of the essence of my photo editing, honestly. The biggest thing that you want to keep an eye on is exposure. You don't want it to be overexposed, but you definitely don't want it to be underexposed. When the light is behind your subject, like in this case I am, all of these lights, but I become underexposed or backlit because there's so many bright lights behind me but not enough light in front of me. So the only thing you have to really do is to combat that is just raise your shadows, and then once you raise your shadows and you correct the picture to the way that you want to, just literally fix everything else. Maybe when you were increasing your shadows, it became a little bit too noisy and it had too much pixelation. You go to noise reduction, but then when you go to noise reduction and it becomes a little bit too soft, and you go into sharpening and you raise that bitch up. Now that you kind of have a good idea of what your picture kind of looks like right now, what you can do is go to color, and you can keep fucking around with it a little bit more. Now that we're going into this photo, so is there anything wrong with this photo? Fundamentally, no. But artistically and creatively, I want to express myself a little bit more creatively. So the main thing about this one that I'd want to change is, as I said before, raise the exposure a little bit. The reason why I do that is because in photograph, when things tend to be brighter, in my eyes, they tend to pop a little more. A few photographers might argue with me with this and say oh, it looks a little bit too overexposed, or it doesn't look realistic enough. And technically, they could be right. Mind you, there is no correct way to edit photos. It's really all up to what your eye thinks looks good and not. For me, I just like it to be a little bit brighter. And the main thing that I want to do to this one is that, when it comes to my photos, for some reason, I really don't like the color green, even if it's supposed to be there. Obviously there's grass and leaves and shit everywhere. I'm not very fond of the color green, especially when it's on my Instagram feed. What you can do is you can go under this color tab, and then on the right next to where it says black and white, there's a little color wheel. And what happens is it's called a color mix, and you can select individual colors that you want to tune in and out. So in this case, I don't like having greens in my shots, so I'm gonna click green, desaturate it, and then increase the luminance to make sure that it's gone. When you look at my feed, you mainly see like monochromatic blacks and whites and grays with a little pop of like yellow and red, because I like a warm kind of tint to my photos, but I mostly like to keep it very monochromatic and very just simplistic, right? Whenever I look at a photo, I think of the color scheme of it as well. So if you think of my feed's color scheme as neutral colors with a little bit of warm tints, what I tend to do is I go to the color mix, I go to green, teal, blue, and just desaturate everything to make sure that none of it is in my photo. So all you're left with is just the reds and oranges and yellow, which obviously for some people that's not what you want to do, and that's completely fine. But for me, that's how I enjoy editing my photos, and that's kind of what I want to show you guys, is that you're able to express yourself with these photos in any way that you want. You don't have to like do it in like a certain way to appease anybody. Other than, you know, of course, if you're doing like a shoot for a client, then you have to do what they want to do, right? But when you're editing these photos, once you kind of have an idea of like the tool set that you're given in these apps, you can really just do whatever you want with them. I'm only showing you my way just because this is what I think looks good, and we'll do like a quick before after real quick. See, very natural, very normal, and which is, you know, nothing's wrong with that. But if you add a little bit of flair to it, boom. But yeah, that's pretty much my, I guess, like quick tutorial of how I usually edit my photos. It's honestly really easy. Again, the main things are just make sure that the exposure is set right and nothing's overexposed or underexposed, and get creative with it, especially with the colors. These tools are honestly really easy to use. It's just a matter of figuring out what your taste is and what you like, and just kind of implementing it and experimenting with it to see where it goes. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you guys want to see more of these. I'm kind of experimenting with like all types of new content if you guys haven't already noticed. And yeah, stay tuned to the next one, and peace.